In this video, I want to talk to you about a very practical but crucially important matter in dysfunctional marriages, or maybe even a not dysfunctional marriage when something comes up. And that is, when does a Christian wife or husband put their children over their spouse? Now, we always hear that, oh, spouse first, marriage comes first. So, and, we don't put the children first. And especially as a wife, where you have the feeling that, I need to submit to my husband, I need to go along with his leadership. I want to make sure that I don't, pull that away from him and hurt his self-esteem and kind of disrespect him as the head of the house. So I know for me, when I got married when I was 20 and I had kids right away, so I was really young, really literally applying scripture, and my husband came from that same kind of home. And so for me, I was very literal with that when I was first married, and I made some mistakes. I had the belief that no matter what, I was supposed to put my husband first over the kids. And it's not that I didn't speak up. I did speak up when I didn't like the way something was done, or, when I felt that he was doing something that was harmful to the kids. But I didn't go further. I didn't set boundaries. I didn't say no. I didn't intervene and refuse to allow certain things to happen. And I believe that that was wrong. So there's a scripture in Psalms that talks about children. No, it doesn't talk about children. It talks about victims, talks about helpless people. And it says, the victim, it's talking about God, but it says, the victim commits himself to you because you are the helper of the fatherless, and that we are also supposed to defend the fatherless and the oppressed. So we need to stand up, and we need to be willing to stand up for those that are helpless, those that are oppressed, those that are true victims. And children do not have equal power in relationships. They do not have the power that a parent has. They do not have the voice and the strength and the ability to set boundaries and protect themselves. They don't have the understanding, the awareness to do that. So there has to be a point where you're willing to say, no, I'm going to step in and protect the child. And I'm not talking about, minor discipline disagreements. I'm not talking about giving your child everything you want. And there are differences between men and women, typically, not always. The man is less emotional and tends to be stricter. The woman is more emotional, identifies more with the emotions of the children, not always, but typically that is the mom. And so, I'm not talking about stepping in and doing that. I'm talking about times where your child is really hurt. Your child is hurting. Your child is not being taken care of. For example, emotional abuse, which is never okay. Not having a child who, this is very common, where the child is in need of some type of therapy, some type of special education, some type of medication, maybe for ADHD, maybe for depression as a teen, or something is going on, and one parent sees the problem and wants to give the child what is being recommended, and the other spouse refuses to admit there's a problem. The other parent refuses to say, yes, the child has ADHD, or yes, the child needs medication. And you have a child, and one parent is crucially, painfully aware of this child's emotional or physical, mental need or educational need, and the other parent is just, no, that's it. And it could be a divorced situation. It could be where the family is in the home. In the home, it's even harder because you have to, that's more where you're thinking about, how is this going to impact my relationship? Divorce situation, you might be in a situation where the court is requiring both of you to agree, and so that person kind of holds you hostage unless you can take the money and go back to court and try to prove something, which is lengthy and expensive. But so it's kind of a different situation. But that, or if you have a child who's just really hurt and hurting based on the way that that parent interacts with the child, maybe just really, angry or very condescending, or making the child feel guilty, or maybe very narcissistically, and you see that child hurting and the child can't stand up for himself or herself, and you're trying to figure out, when do I jump in? Let me tell you, triangulating has its own risks, and it is that whole triangle. I've got another video on that, the Cartman triangle, where, when you jump in, you make one person the persecutor. Usually when you jump in, when a parent is dealing with a child, you're going to make the parent the persecutor, you make the child the victim, and you're the rescuer. Automatically, you're telling the child this person's wrong. You're telling the child you're the victim. That empowers the child. The other person gets angry with you. Then you've got the child who is feeling like they don't even have to comply at all or listen or cooperate. So the child gets emboldened. And then you end up, oftentimes I would do that, and then I would see the child kind of not give in or not do what needed to be done or not care about the parent and get more emboldened. And then I would turn and get annoyed with the child. And then I would end up trying to push the child to do what needed to be done when my husband didn't give in and make a change. So I ended up mad at both of them. Then I ended up having them both mad at me. And especially if you jump in, and because you jump in, the other parent gets more angry with that child, and the child gets in more trouble, because then the feelings that that parent has toward you can now be sent toward the child. So it can get really complicated. So you have to be careful. You have to think all this through. You have to figure out what are the ramifications. But the other side of this coin is, if you don't jump in when this child is being hurt, and this child knows that you know that the child is being hurt, you can also cause anger from the child toward you, and also double abuse or additional abuse, where you are telling the child, I'm not going to rescue you. I see your pain. I think your mom is wrong, but I'm not going to do anything about it. And that is also damaging to the child. This happened in homes where, very common, where one child was molested. The parent that knows about it refused to do anything about it, didn't believe it, didn't rescue that child, and that child felt just as abandoned, or even more angry and abandoned by the parent who could have rescued, than at the parent or the family member who actually did the abuse. So it's complicated, but I just want to say that that whole idea of I have to put my spouse first, you have to weigh the situation. Scripturally, in 1 Peter, there's this section here where it talks about who is going to harm you if you're eager to do good, but even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear what they fear. So if you're suffering for doing what is right, now that suffering for doing what is right often comes when you step up and make a stand. So getting out of your comfort zone and stepping out and confronting a spouse and saying, no, this isn't okay. I'm not going to allow this. This has to change, will often get you more flack and retribution and negative repercussions than just being quiet and doing nothing. So that scripture to me means standing up, taking a stand for what is right, and being willing to say, no, this isn't okay. And maybe have that spouse mad at you, have that spouse upset at you. I'm going to put our child on ADHD medication because our child is failing and I can't contribute to that. If you refuse to go to the doctor and you refuse to go to the school meetings and you refuse to admit there's a problem, I can't support your position. I cannot go along with it and hurt our child. The longer a child does not get the appropriate medication and help in school, the worse the child's self-esteem gets, the more the child understands that failure is the only thing that that child can do. And then you put that child into that track. So maybe you have to just say, I can't do this to our child. I can't participate in what is knowingly harming my child. I wish that I knew that and could have done that strongly in my life when I was younger, because that was something that would have been better for my children. So here are some of the things you have to keep in mind. Children cannot take care of themselves. They don't have equal power in the relationship. You are responsible for your children. Okay, they are yours. They're your responsibility. You are their guardian. You are responsible to the Lord for them, right? You have to make the best decision for them and be true to your own conscience. You have to live with it. You have to live knowing that you did what was right. Sometimes that means stepping up and having some, negative repercussions, as I said. You have to put them over, their best interests over maintaining peace in your marriage and in your relationship. And again, I'm not talking about little things, what time they go to bed, that kind of stuff. I'm talking about big stuff. Triage. Sometimes when that child feels abandoned and mistreated, and you can't, the triangle thing, you literally have to just take a stand and not just argue it, but literally set a boundary. It doesn't have to be always in front of that child, but just take a stand and willing to say to your spouse, this isn't okay, this isn't going to happen. That is the way that your child feels protected. Anything short of that, the child just feels like you're participating in it. So I've given you those examples, and there is another scripture here. Oh, I was going to talk to you about this principle. And this was in a marriage situation, but it wasn't about children, but it was about protecting the family and the people over which she had a responsibility to their lives. And that was Abigail. Abigail was Nabal's wife. And remember, David came to Nabal and he said, basically, my guys helped you, and we did this extra stuff for you and helping you out with all your stuff. So now we're here and I need some food for my men. So I'm going to ask you to provide food for my men. And Nabal said, no, I'm not going to provide anything. And David got real mad. That was a huge insult. And David was like, I'm going to revenge. I'm going to go kill him, and I'm going to go kill his servants. And one of the servants came to Abigail, Nabal's wife, and she said, and told her what happened and said, look, I'm afraid David's going to come and he's going to wipe us all out. And Nabal's name was, I'm sorry, it says in here about Nabal that he was a surly and mean man. And I believe his name meant fool. And so Abigail quickly, instead of giving in and going along with her husband's foolishness that could have gotten them all in trouble and hurt them and even caused there to be lives lost, she told her servant, go pack up these cakes, these raisin cakes, go bring these animals, go bring all this stuff out of our storehouse quickly, get it all together. And she got out and she went with him and she brought all the food to David. And she said, here it is. Please don't do what you're planning to do. My husband is a fool. And she said, just please, save my family. And God literally struck her husband and killed him, showing us that God was pleased with what she did. She ended up becoming one of David's wives, but here is an example in scripture of where she went against her husband to protect her family. So this is a perfect example to use in this situation. And that, as I said, was in 1 Samuel 25 is that story where you can read that. So again, this is not for small things. This is for big things, that there are times that you have to step in and put your children over your spouse, over a husband or a wife, if it is in your child's best interest. So if you have more questions on this, I do have a chapter in my book, 10 Life-Saving Principles for Women in Difficult Marriages, which men have also read to apply to their own marriage. There is a chapter in there on prioritizing your children. I also have an audio online that is part of that series called Prioritizing Your Children. So the principles that I teach work in difficult marriages, any difficult family relationship. So I hope you will check out my other resources. I have books. I have a 365 daily devotional, 2 books, one called When Love Hurts, 10 Principles to Transform Your Difficult Relationships, the same principles in the other book, except not the chapter on dealing with children in a difficult marriage. So they're all there. They teach all my principles, lots of YouTube videos you can take advantage of. So I hope you will seek out more from my ministry that addresses things like this. So God bless, and thank you for watching.